Caribbean Roulette, Episode 3, Shadows on Calle San Sebastián. The streets of San Juan were still alive, even at that late hour. It was well past midnight, yet many people were still walking through the city. In this part of the world, night was a blessing, a relief from the burning sun and the heavy, humid air. A cooler wind from the ocean brushed pleasantly against my face. I was slowly walking home to my house on Calle San Sebastián. Although I had lived there for some time, I still thought of it as a dream come true. A small, single-story house in the old part of San Juan, an orange facade, arched windows and doors, a decorative wrought iron lamp beside the entrance. Typical Caribbean Spanish architecture from many decades ago. I liked that place. And yet, that evening, just like many evenings before it, the house felt empty. It lacked the people I loved. In front of the entrance, I stopped and took out a cigarette, the last one of the day. I leaned against the wall and lit it. Looking down the narrow street, I watched the passers-by. And then I noticed them. On the other side of the street, two men were walking, slowly. They were looking in my direction. When they realized I was watching them, they quickened their pace and turned into the nearest side street. I frowned. That was strange. The alley was a dead end. It led nowhere. They either had to live there, or they had simply got lost. I finished my cigarette, and suddenly I remembered where I knew them from. I had seen them before. They had been sitting in the tavern, in the far corner of the room. For a moment longer, I stared into the darkness. Then I shrugged. And why should I care? I went inside. I opened the windows, letting some cooler air into the house. Then I took a quick shower and went to bed. The alcohol, the emotions, and the exhaustion had done their work. I fell asleep almost immediately. The next morning, I was woken by energetic knocking at the door. I looked at my watch, a few minutes after 7. I did not have to guess who it was. Celestina, the wife of the local baker. Every day she brought fresh bread, milk, and butter, and while she was at it, she could talk a man to death. I opened the door. "Buenos dias, señor. I brought your order. My husband picked out the crispiest rolls especially for you." She rushed inside like a hurricane. "Oh, you look tired. Too much fun last night?" I smiled. I liked having her around. She was my morning alarm clock. A short, energetic brunette in her 50s, always smiling, always full of life. When she finally left, a blessed silence settled over the house. I made myself breakfast, fresh rolls, butter, a little honey, and strong coffee. Life is beautiful, I thought, taking the first bite. During breakfast, I opened my notebook. The plan for the day was not particularly busy. A meeting with the architect, then lunch, Celestina's afternoon visit, and nothing else. At the very top of the page, I added only one sentence. Wait for a message from Anna. I closed the notebook. With a cup of coffee in my hand, I stepped out into the small garden behind the house. I sat down in the wicker armchair and began looking through the morning paper. A concert by a local music star, problems with the construction of a new hotel, a few minor pieces of news, and then I came across a short crime report. 3 days ago in Aguadilla, the captain of a fishing boat was shot dead. Police are asking witnesses to come forward. I read the article again. Carlos had mentioned that case. But what was so unusual about it? Puerto Rico had long been a crossroads for many smuggling routes: drugs, weapons, illegal business. Stories like that happened more often than the locals would have liked. I put the newspaper down. I looked up at the sky. It was going to be a beautiful day. The meeting with the architect took much longer than I had expected. We discussed the scope of work, the preliminary measurements, and the schedule for preparing the map. When I finally left his office, the sun was already high above the city. Slowly, I headed toward old San Juan. I loved that part of the city. The colorful townhouses, the cobbled streets, the smell of the sea, music drifting from open windows, and that special atmosphere of a place that still remembered corsairs, galleons, and Spanish governors. Walking without hurry, I reached my favorite café. As usual, I chose a table under a large umbrella. I ordered strong coffee and a pastry that reminded me of a Polish eclair. I loved those pastries. Every time, they reminded me of Gdansk. I sat back comfortably and began watching people. Tourists, locals, street vendors, drivers constantly honking at one another. A perfectly ordinary day. At least, on the surface. Then I saw them again. The two men. They were sitting on the other side of the cafe garden. Dark suits, sunglasses, and looks I could not ignore. I felt an unpleasant stab of unease. Were they the same ones? Or only similar? Was I exaggerating? Was I simply becoming paranoid? I tried not to think about them. It did not work. 1 hour passed, then another. Customers changed at the tables. Some left, others arrived. Only they remained exactly where they were. They did not talk. They did not read newspapers. They did not look like tourists. They simply sat there. And from time to time, they looked in my direction. Finally, I decided to test my suspicion. I called the waitress over. "I'm going to buy cigarettes for a moment. Please don't clear my table. I'll be right back." "Of course, senor." I paid the bill and left. I crossed to the other side of the street. Near a shop window, I stopped in such a way that I could see the cafe garden reflected in the glass. I pretended to be interested in the display. In reality, I was watching them. After a while, both men stood up. They paid and started walking. My heart beat faster. I went into the shop. I asked for cigarettes. Then, to make it look natural, I bought a newspaper as well. Through the glass, I watched their every move. They passed the shop, slowly, calmly, as if nothing at all was happening. I paid and stepped back onto the street. They were already moving away toward the next intersection. For a moment, I watched them go. Then I smiled to myself. This time, I had no doubts left. "I've got you, you bastards. You really are following me." For a while, I watched their figures moving away. I had no doubts left. This was not a coincidence. But why? What could they possibly want? I was not a politician. I was not a millionaire. I was not involved in any business that could interest anyone. And yet, for 2 days, the same men had appeared wherever I was. I looked once more toward the intersection. They were gone, as if they had melted into the crowd. Slowly, I returned to the cafe. As I sat back down at my table, I began to analyze the situation. And then, for the first time, a disturbing thought came to me. What if this had something to do with my past? For many years I had lived quietly, far from Europe, far from the people I had once known, far from matters I had decided long ago, were closed. Nobody here should have been looking for me. Nobody. I reached for my cup of coffee. My hand trembled slightly. I tried to remember when I had first noticed them. In the tavern. It had been in the tavern, the day before. I frowned. And when had I met Anna? That very same day. A coincidence? Perhaps. But over the years, I had learned not to believe in coincidences, especially when several apparently unrelated events begin to arrange themselves into a logical sequence. No, it still proved nothing. And yet, I could not shake the feeling that everything had begun at the exact moment Anna came back into my life. Was it possible they were following her? Or were they following me because of her? The longer I thought about it, the less I liked it. One thing was certain. I had to be careful. And I had to find out who those men were, before they found out anything more about me. End of episode 3. Thank you for listening. I invite you to the next episode of Caribbean Roulette. Episode 4. The night is quiet, the room is dark, and someone is standing behind the window. Someone is watching him. Episode 4. Coming soon.